So good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Randy Gerber with Gerber, and today we're going to talk about a new kind of environment, the evolution of people in place during COVID. And I'm going to let everybody go around and introduce themselves and what they do in their business and their contribution to this conversation this morning. So Kit, well, I'm a natural to my left first type person.
Okay.
So
thank you, Randy. Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me to be here. I'm Kit Foreman. I'm a human resources consultant. I work primarily with first generation entrepreneurs and small businesses that I want to make an intentional effort to be good employers as they scale their business. A lot of the work that I do is similar to what a fractional CHRO would do, bringing a strategic HR management to tie in with business strategy towards better business outcomes.
by the way, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile this week, and it speaks exactly to what you do in my experience. So,
Okay.
So for those who want to understand what Kit does, I'd spend some time on her LinkedIn profile as well.
Great.
JR?
JR Kern with Capital Equities. We own a commercial real estate firm, brokerage and management. Most of our practice, actually 50–60% of our practice is in the office market. We do some other things such as retail and restaurant work as well, but I think most of today's focus is going to be revolving around the office market and how things have been changed and how the impacts are going to change the office environment going forward.
And I want to congratulate JR for expanding his wardrobe. Today is the first time he has not worn a Hawaiian shirt to a presentation. So just congratulations and welcome, JR.
Did it all for you.
Thank you.
Hi, Alicia Zambelli. I'm an attorney, a partner at the law firm Isaac Wild. I specialize in commercial real estate. My practice is primarily commercial leasing, but it's all aspects of real estate. I also do some liquor permit work for tenants for bars and restaurants. A lot of my landlord-sided representation is in the office environment.
So you've not been busy the last 6 months.
No, it's just I've been on the beach and, ample free time.
Exactly.
My joke was, I never thought I would be so busy during the end of the world.
There we go. Last but not least,
Sashalevich Cpa, client executive with Highland, spent 13 years at BDO as an auditor and consultant, helping lead their national restaurant practice. Made the move over here to Highland. We're a large privately held independent insurance agency and risk management firm. I do a lot within the restaurant space, but have clients across all industries, have worked with family offices, private equity firms, as well as public companies throughout my career. So thanks for coming.
and Vince is legitimately passionate about insurance in a way that I never thought was possible. But he is and does a terrific job for his clients, of which we have many shared folks. So today, so 2020 has been a year of change, to say the least. And, as I talk to our clients, which are primarily first generation entrepreneurs, we hear a lot of conversation around how people can't wait for 2021 to come. And I think that's true for many. And one of the concerns that I have, and this is speaking for myself, that I think people have this expectation that as the election is over, and while the election likely won't be over in November 3rd or 4th, whatever the day is, it'll be over sometime this year. And certainly that will bring some change. There's no doubt about it. There'll be some change culturally and societally. The concern that I have is that I'm not convinced that we won't continue to have change in 2021 that is subtle and nuanced and maybe not in ways we don't expect. And that's, one of the things that I think in 2020, we've learned to adapt to change that's been forced upon us. And so there's a lot of grace and a lot of patience with people because we all recognize as a generalization that we've been forced to deal with change. And I do believe there'll still be some of that in 2021 because at the end of the day, I'm not sure politics will simply evaporate come January 1st. I think there'll still be some political hangover with COVID and other issues as well. The difference, I think, is that you are going to have some ability to either influence, maybe control some of the change going forward. The concern I have is that there may be some change that is still, forced or induced upon us, and we'll deal with that. But there could be a missed opportunity to not embrace change as well and adapt to change. And, as a generalization, I think particularly for small businesses, there's permanent change for so many of us, whether it be how you deliver your services, when you deliver your services and goods, and where you do it from, and the people who work for you. So, that's an overall premise of this conversation, is to get you to think about, what change can we adapt by choice? Can we introduce by choice to make us a better business? And that's one thing, I think we all share this opinion. There's an opportunity for all of us to have much better businesses on the flip side of this. We have crisis all the time in the world and in America, and ultimately, many times we have creative destruction where businesses that were weak or industries that were archaic go out of business. There'll be obviously a lot of creative destruction with this, with the pandemic. However, I think there's an opportunity to be offensive and improve your business and change it for the good. And so one of those things that is a big topic, and we talked about this a little bit in our last seminar, is the workspace. And I know JR in previous conversations that, and I guess for both of you, in previous conversations that, you both have said that 2020, the change was basically forced upon us by landlords and banks and governments. And I'm kind of curious, as we get through this and the issues with COVID change become, maybe even more confusing in some respects, how do you guys feel, and JR, I'll have you go first, how do you feel the workplace environment is going to change, looking at 2021 and maybe, rolling into 2022 even? What does that look like to you?
Well, I wish I had the crystal ball, certainly, as we all do. Just in the last 6, 7, 8 months, we've seen change every single month. I think when this pandemic first hit, with everyone working remotely, we thought the office market was going to, fall apart and crumble. And, then 90 days later, you've got people working, part-time from the home and then part-time from the office. Then a hybrid, kind of much like the school systems are doing right now with a lot of kids. Things are changing and evolving literally every day, every week. And I really don't see that stabilizing, in the near 6, 9, 12 months. I think everyone is still gonna be working to figure out how does their business fit within all the change that's going on? How can they work remotely? How can they work in the office safely? How do they grow their business and either stay within the confines of their current real estate, or do they expand and take on more overhead? There's just so many different factors right now that we're seeing, and I'm seeing people, distance more within offices and taking more real estate. I'm actually seeing other people.
Is that a permanent trend, do you think?
I don't think it's a permanent trend. I think everything that we're seeing right now and everything that we're going to see in the next 9 to 12 months is going to be very short term. I think that a lot of my colleagues thought that early on that we were going to see some very permanent changes to the real estate industry. And the more that I'm getting feedback from tenants, the more that I'm hearing from clients, the more that I'm hearing that everyone wants to be back to some semblance of normal, certainly, but most people don't want to be working out of the house anymore. We're a social people, right? We like to interact with others. We like to have, short, quick meetings as you're walking by, your buddy's cubicle. The communication, the efficiency is just so much better in the office than out of the office, that I think everyone really wants to be back. So the real question then becomes, how do you do that effectively and safely within, the confines of the 4 walls that you rent? And it's maybe modifying the space itself a little bit. Some people are putting some additional walls up, plexiglass. Some people, building glass offices. They're just reconfiguring the space where maybe you had more soft seating areas with couches, tables, chairs, stuff like that. Now people have spread their cubicles out a little bit or their tables out and taken over some of that softer seating space.
So,
And Alicia, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to piggyback on that and say, I think you talk about how things have evolved over the months. Certainly, initially we heard people saying, oh, this remote is working out wonderfully. Why don't we just keep it this way? To your point, talking about big changes in the market. And now we're talking about people coming back. And we're seeing a lot of surveys that are coming in. As long as employees feel safe, they want to come back. So again, I'm going to support your point there and say it's up to us to make sure that those workplace environments are safe. And if that means distancing people, it may have the opposite effect on the commercial real estate.
Yeah. You know, and we ourselves, I mean, when we moved into our current space we have, well, I thought we had 3,000 to 4,000 extra square feet that we didn't need. And now with the social distancing, you know, we're something like 1,000 square feet per person. But, you know, I look around and I wonder, will we ever go back to our old configuration? Because one of the things I've noticed is people, like COVID's one thing, but people aren't getting the flu, people haven't been sick. And it's, you know, and it's, we're not, I remember in our old space where somebody would get sick and all of a sudden everybody would get sick. And because we were on top of each other. And I just, you know, I'm wondering as an entrepreneur myself, is this a permanent change for us? So we just have maximum efficiency. And part of working from home as well too, which I'll talk about in a second. Alicia, my question regarding kind of the point JR was making is, so he's seeing it, JR, and seeing it from a market perspective. What are you seeing from a legal perspective, if anything, regarding changes with landlords and tenants at this point?
Well, I agree with everything that JR said. I think that we're kind of in a limbo of sorts for probably 18 months. And I think 24 months from now, we're going to stabilize somewhat closely to where we were before. I certainly think there's going to be some industries that have found that they could work remotely fairly effectively and will maintain that to a certain degree. I think the Nationwides and the Cardinal Healths of the world, and certainly the Cover My Meds, despite the fact they just built a giant new building, they have found that they can be somewhat productive, more so than some other industries. And I do think that some industries will maintain a smaller real estate footprint. I think that first 90 days, so like March to, you know, mid-June, there was from a legal standpoint, from a landlord-tenant standpoint, a lot of panic, of a lot of you know, renegotiation of leases on a short-term basis, a lot of questioning whether a tenant should consider giving back space early termination. I think a lot of that, from my client's perspective, a lot of that has stabilized. To both JR and Kit's points, I think that in that initial 90 days, people thought we can work from home forever and this is going to be great for a lot of people. And I think that has really turned the corner. I mean, I know from a professional services side, which I'll get to later, I just don't think it's viable long term. And and just to JR's point, human beings are social. I mean, there are outliers. There are people that would be perfectly happy.
There's a few, for sure.
Yeah, never.
We know who you are, by
They'd
the
be
way.
perfectly happy, never leaving their houses again. But you know, I for one, you know, I to your point too, Randy, it's like, you know, collaboration among like the workforce that is so, it creates so much productivity. So I have seen a drop off on lease renegotiations as of late. Most of those deals actually kind of contemplated through the end of 2020. So it will be interesting to see the election come and go, the loosening up of regulations, we think, we hope, and then sort of turning the corner into 2021, what that looks like. And from an office perspective, I don't think we're going to see a lot of change as far as the existing leases personally.
Vince, you know, I mean, it seems to me business is more complicated than ever. Owning a business and running a business is the word I hear over and over again is complex. And with that, I think about all the change in liabilities, and, you know, you get obviously legislation with House Bill 606 that's changed things, and more people, you know, working remotely. I mean, is it even possible to predict what's going to happen in the insurance market and liability market, or what's your take on all this?
So the insurance market in general, just based on, I've been telling people that it's directly relatable to what's going on in the world. You know, obviously when underwriters are looking at an account, they're trying to understand what can go wrong. And obviously as it relates to say business interruption claims or civil unrest or whatever it may be, there's been a definite impact on the market. Since we're sort of on the entire topic of work environments and employees, I was, of course, as I said earlier, an auditor. We always worried about internal controls, had to worry about internal controls. And now I find myself worried about risk. Whenever we're going through that evaluation, I'll ask companies, my clients, my prospects, show me where you have this documented in writing. And, you know, sometimes people are like, oh, we do this in practice, but it's not documented. And I can tell you right now is the underwriting process in general has become more scrutinous than probably it ever has been. Documentation of your business and your policies and procedures is absolutely imperative. To just do the right thing for your business from a corporate governance perspective, but also to ensure you're protected. Clients have been reaching out to me recently asking about, okay, we've stopped travel for a while. Now my clients are looking to travel again. What should we be thinking about? What I can tell you is if you don't have things documented, have them documented. And what I can also tell you.
So when you say things, what do you mean?
Policies, procedures, travel policies, work environment policies, remote work policies, any of those corporate governance policies that any business should have in place.
Okay.
If you have an employment practices liability policy, which is a policy that protects you against discrimination, wrongful termination, ADA, et cetera, most of those carriers, you know, I'll throw one out to my friends at Chubb, is they have websites that are portals that are available to policyholders that provide you access to standard templates that have been updated to take COVID into consideration, that build the framework that you can easily leverage for free to modify and get those procedures in place. The one thing I would say is obviously there's been a lot of change. We won't go into all of it during this conversation in business in general, but your governance structure, your risk management structure should change as your business changes. Don't become complacent on it and have it bite you in the butt in here.
So I hear you loud and clear. It makes a lot of sense. And, you know, I know firsthand entrepreneurs don't like taking the time to document and have employee handbooks. I mean, but it, you know, from my own experience, not only as a employer, but also as an advisor to clients, it's really critical to do just that, to document and have policies and procedures. And by the way, policies and procedures that you follow and execute as written.
Yeah.
And so my question, so Vince, that makes sense to me, and it's a good time to revisit all that. The other question I have is really specific and tactical, aside from call you. What should people do with their insurance? I mean, should you shop it now? Should you wait? Should you?
Okay. So what I'll tell you is, A, it depends on the relationship with the carrier, but B, because of everything that's going on, there's upward macro pressure on rates. The last thing that anyone should
Said in English, that means rates are going up.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's a lot that your agent can do to help control that based on the relationships, based on working hard for you and your best interest. However, there's certain macro factors you can't. We're seeing a lot of non-renewals. We're seeing a lot of massive rate increases, exclusions being added onto policies. One of the things right now is a lot of carriers are adding a communicable disease exclusion onto your general liability policy. Obviously, I do a lot of restaurants. Foodborne illness is classified as a communicable disease by the NIH. Obviously, I'd never even come close to putting a policy in place for a client that had that on it. So there is a lot of change. You don't want to put it on autopilot. I will tell you, 2 areas that have been significantly impacted, actually 3. Cyber breaches are on the rise. A lot of businesses have been negatively impacted because of this. We're seeing a lot of claims, even in private companies, against directors and officers of organizations due to bad performance. And because of the companies that have had to do furloughs, reductions in force, layoffs, we are also seeing a lot of plaintiff attorneys recruit essentially people that have been impacted to try to bring claims for discrimination, wrongful termination, ADA matters against businesses. So there's been a lot of conversations, a lot of hard conversations with clients during this. But if insurance was just sort of something that you thought about as an afterthought before, you should really be thinking about it as risk management right now. And if you're not, that's leaving your balance sheet exposed.
Awesome, thank you. So one of the things that, and this, I think Kit's going to impact you a lot, and my question here, we have seen, you know, so obviously with COVID, the workforce became very disrupted. And so, you know, some employers had to furlough people or lay them off. Some employers couldn't afford to lay anybody off if people want to go to work, and some combination thereof. And then there's this group of employees out there who they're using this as an opportunity to change their life, you know, whether it be stay home with the kids or relocate locations or, you know, just change careers or whatever the case may be. And so that's obvious, right? That we see it front and center every day in the paper, the amount of disruption in the workforce. What isn't so obvious, but we're starting to see with our clients is that, and you know, I put myself in this camp, we lost 2 people to COVID. You know, we're not so quick to replace them with people, but rather technology. And I just wonder, you know, as you have things that costs going up with insurance and legal costs going up, and the risk with people in general, I believe you're going to see more and more businesses embrace technology on a much more rapid scale today, because again, they're forced to, and we're looking at change. And I guess I wonder from a long-term perspective, and I guess 2 different questions, but starting with that what type of, you know, if somebody hasn't really experienced much turnover because of COVID, if they've been, you know, lucky or unlucky, I don't know how you want to put it, and you know, that entrepreneur begins thinking about technology, what type of cultural considerations should they have? They're going to maybe engage. They're going to be the ones to let people go versus people leave on their own.
Well, you know, one of the things that I'm prepared to talk today about is the productivity and how we manage productivity in this new environment. And it goes to your question here. I think that we're going to have to make a shift in the way that we manage people. We should already be doing that. I think, you know, that's going to continue to be important. And if we are managing people effectively and managing their productivity effectively, I think it's going to eliminate some waste. I think that it certainly reduces the opportunity for people to fly under the radar and be less than fully productive in their work. If we are setting up expectations and then wanting to look at that product or that outcome, and we're seeing hard evidence of that, that may be a new accountability for a lot of people. So we may find that we're managing some of those folks out, that we're flying under the radar or are not as productive as we need them to be. And we have may be able to have some savings on there and then look about how to do those things more efficiently. But I see a change in that as if we are managing more effectively, and I think management tactics and leadership is going to be critical.
So let's talk about that. So you know, in our last conversation we had, you had mentioned it was under the positioning of work from home and work from the office, and your point was, hey, businesses need to manage productivity, period, and not hours and location, and then that makes a lot of sense. How you know, how do you manage, and what type of evolution do entrepreneurs and specifically small businesses need to go through to transition from managing the way they used to being very focused on productivity regardless of location?
Well, I think some businesses are already doing it well. There's no doubt about that. But I think where we're going to have to see the biggest changes in the businesses that are going to have to make the biggest transition are those that are not using good management techniques. And it may involve doing some very specific training on how to do this. I think we have to re-examine job descriptions, make sure that they're clear, that people understand what the expectations are, that there's a mutual understanding. We need to be able to articulate clearly what any individual's product is. You know, whether it's easier when you have task-oriented positions, and it gets harder as you move towards outcome-oriented positions, and what we should be able to articulate what that is and say what it is. And then we need to—
Can every position be outcome-oriented in general?
There always should be an objective to any role.
Okay.
But I think it's easier at the end of the day for somebody that has a task-oriented job to be able to say, well, what did you accomplish today? Well, here's all my task. It's a checklist. You know, where you have an outcome or a project-oriented kind of thing, well, then we have to establish milestones. And how are we doing with those milestones? But we have to say ahead of time what those things are. And we don't do a really good job of that right now. Managers don't.
Particularly in small
It's
businesses.
particularly in small businesses. I think a lot of times we don't have the resources to do the type of training or to develop our middle management teams, or even our business owners are not good about setting those expectations. So I think that has to get better. As we get better doing that, we do get more productivity because there's a clear understanding of what we're supposed to accomplish. And then there it is. We have to define how we're going to report that also. How are we going to show that progress? And then there has to be those accountability discussions. And we have to move away from accountability discussions being assumed to be corrective actions or disciplinary actions and more into coaching and feedback. This is a lot of the stuff we've been advocating for years. And now, because of this forced change, we're going to see the businesses that thrive are going to be the ones that embrace this and recognize this, this need to pivot and really get on board with this.
So that's great. You came in prepared to talk about that. So now I want to talk about what you're unprepared to talk about.
Okay.
I don't know what that is yet, but I'll get to you.
Okay.
Randy,
That's fine.
let me kind of piggyback on that, because what we've seen, you know, with a lot of our larger clients, you've got certain departments that, you know, very task oriented, and they can work remotely very easily. And I think you can gauge how productive they are, and what their output really is. But then you've got this creative side to, you know, a handful of businesses, and the creative group are really struggling, I think,
Right.
with that output and not being with, you know, the team that they were once with on a daily basis. And they're kind of just floating out there. And so a lot of it is going to be very industry specific too.
Yes.
I think when this whole thing shakes out, you know, I think maybe 10% of, you know, the office market will be able to work remotely reasonably efficiently. I don't think it's going to be much higher than that. That's
Is that 2 years away, 3 years away, a year away?
I think that's in the next couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people think right now that they're working really efficiently from home, but I think a lot of people haven't, you know, had a litmus test to really, you know, go through the checks and balances to say, well, you know what, are they really producing more or not? You know, I think we've been changing so quickly that we really haven't been gauging, you know, how people have been, you know, working remotely, et cetera.
So you know, it's interesting, Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of Chase, talked on Monday this week about this very topic. And he's the first person I heard articulate it in a way that makes total sense. They said, yeah, the employee workforce really wants to work from home. They want that, at least the flexibility, and they think it's really good for them. You know, like you said, but they don't understand that it's not necessarily good for our customers. It's not good for the bank, and it may not be good for those people who want to work there. He said the challenge is that as employees, they want to work from home, have the ability to, but as consumers, they don't want that. They want to have, and so he said it's a very complex topic that you have the same person who wants multiple things at multiple times. And just like, you know, my the opportunity is that, you know, Amazon changed all of our businesses because people can order what they want, when they want it, and have it delivered quickly. So subconsciously, we all have to compete with that, right? And I think this issue around what the employee wants, we're going to have to compete with this forever, because they want to go home when they want to go home, they want to come in when they want to come in, but as a consumer, they want to be treated just like Amazon treated them. Vince, do you think that from a termination perspective, that if you're, you know, moving from a task-oriented to an outcome-oriented relationship with your employees, does that change the term? If somebody's not performing in your eyes as the entrepreneur, as a shareholder, does that change the termination process and the insurance around that?
I mean, so what you had initially with COVID was you had a lot of businesses that were scared, a lot of uncertainty. People sometimes very, very quickly, as in some operators in the restaurant space, the day that full service dining closed down for nothing but carry out, those terminations were made. However, at the end of the day, there's a relationship between the employee and the employer. From a business perspective, from a relationship perspective, that is evolving, that will likely continue to evolve until, to JR's point, we're back in more of an in-person office environment piece. But again, most employers are employed at will. And at the end of the day, if your employee isn't performing, regardless of where they're doing the work, then they're not holding up their end of the bargain as well.
My question is the measurement of outcome oriented versus task. So it's not the location, but rather that changing the paradigm to be outcome oriented. Do you see that as being problematic from an insurance perspective, or?
No.
Okay.
At the end of the day, again, it comes back to documentation, making sure that you're following the steps and procedures, as long as you have a formal documentation plan and, maybe put them on a performance improvement plan because they're not reaching those outcome objectives. But at the end of the day, it is an employee at will for the most part. And at the end of the day, if they're not performing, you have every right to terminate that employee.
Alicia, you had made a comment earlier regarding professional service firms and the workplace. Want to expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I felt like not just legal, but accounting and similar industries. I felt like when COVID happened in mid-March, we were able to successfully, on a short-term basis, basically pick up the team we had in place, the work in the pipeline we had in place, the projects we were currently working on, and on a remote basis, make it work well enough. Gladly, we had sort of the basic framework of technology in place. Law firms in particular are traditionally very slow to come around to technology. We're still well behind a lot of industries, but we had enough to get us by. We've improved that, which I think will be a lasting component of our business and will allow, which we'll talk about later, some select individuals to productively work either in a hybrid situation or remotely in the future. And we now have in place those necessary technology components. But what I would say is that lasted for my firm in particular. There were 2 weeks where we worked remotely. And then on a case-by-case basis, individuals were allowed to decide whether to work from the office or not. And then we made a formal decision, I want to say it was June 1, maybe it was May 1, time flies by, to encourage all attorneys, all staff, everyone that didn't have an underlying health condition or some other sort of personal reason not to come back to the office, to come back to the office, because I don't think long-term professional service providers can work as productively, as successfully remotely. Because how do you onboard new team members? When you pick up and you already have your team in place, that's one thing. You can maintain contact with one another by email, by phone. I would talk to the handful of attorneys I work with on a regular basis every day. We would update each other on what we were working on. I would talk to clients, obviously. It's still not the same. And then you take in, the concept of onboarding, especially associates, especially not laterals. How do you take a young professional of pretty much any industry and teach them the ropes remotely, and they've never met any of their fellow colleagues of their own age or their mentors? It's just not the same. There's definitely conversations I would have with one of you if I walked by your office and you were there that would be beneficial to me that I'm not going to pick up the phone and call JR about. So it's just, I truly believe that is integral in developing talent, and then it's also integral in getting new work in the pipeline. It's just not, conducive to, at least for me. I mean, I do in-person meetings. I always have. That is like what's helpful to me, and I think it is for most people. So
Yeah, go ahead.
So Kit, on that very topic, let's go back to how we started this a little bit. That do you want to say something?
No.
Okay. I'm going back to the whole notion of choosing to change now, right? So what can small businesses do? What can entrepreneurs do proactively versus reactively to acknowledge, saying, you know what, that we recognize we have to have people in person for onboarding. And at the same time, there's an opportunity to have people work remotely as needed or whatever. What can employers do proactively to get ahead of that and start being in charge of their culture again versus reacting to the culture being inflicted upon them?
Certainly, I think that the businesses that are going to start out ahead of time are the ones that already were treating human resources management as part of their strategic business plan.
Got it.
No doubt about it. And the ones that are lagging are the ones that treated it more as a reactive thing. So we do have to move from reactive, and you have to have those discussions from a strategic point of view and look at how we're managing those teams. And for anybody that's been reluctant to do that, this is forced change for them that's going to move them into a better place. So we've got to be talking about what these issues are. To your point about culture, we've got to recognize that backtrack a little bit. I think another one of the disconnects are for those businesses that have a disconnect between what they say their culture is and what their actual culture is. So when you have a remote workforce that you're trying to hire and onboard, and you're saying these are our core values, and you've got somebody saying, well, this is, I want to make a good decision. I want to go work for this company that has these great values. And then let's face it, cultural assimilation often comes from immersion. So they're trying to adapt to what they think those values are. They don't have the visuals and the immersion in the workforce to see what the actual is. There's a disconnect. You're going to end up with an employee that never engages. You're going to be dissatisfied with them. So we really have to start walking our talk. Reevaluate what our values are. Is that really who we are? Starting back almost from the A of good practice and making sure that our culture really is aligned with this. While we have people in remote, if we're telling them these are the values, these are our values, or we need to change what we're saying our values are. So I think that that's number one, is making sure that we're walking our talk.
Do you think that people should change your values right now? So I hear you loud and clear that you should evaluate that. I get that. And because of the work because of the remote environment, because of the changes, do you think there's some changes to culture and values that employers should make?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay.
Absolutely. And like I said, some businesses have been doing this well, and I get that. So I'm talking about these other ones. We have to make the well-being of people more of a front burner issue. We're seeing an awful lot of mental health issues coming out in the workplace right now. We're having meltdowns. We've got people with severe burnout because they're not taking time off. We have to more proactively be involved with our people. Leaders have to proactively engage and have more conversations. I saw a wonderful idea come out throughout this, where they're doing some skip level meetings with people that are working remotely. That it's not just your supervisors talking with you, it's a skip level. And we've got leaders that are reaching 2 steps down and have these individual conversations with people on a one-to-one basis. So they're connecting more at that level. We have to create that engagement. Gallup, I love using the Gallup tool engagement survey with the Q12. One of the questions on the Q12 that they've used for years to measure employee engagement is, I have a best friend at work.
Oh, interesting.
And that because it's proven that if somebody has someone at work that they're personally connected to, it makes their day better when they're there, and that increases engagement.
Yep.
If you're not there to create those personal relationships with people, how can you create those bonds that help you feel engaged? So there's all kinds of ways that we can recognize engagement factors, going back to the tools that we already have, but we have to make it proactive. That's part of our business strategy. We're taking those proactive steps to make sure that we're hitting on those points.
Kit, are you seeing the fallout from burnout rather from people that are in the office working or remotely working?
Everybody's burnt out. Everybody's burnt out. We all have pandemic fatigue. I mean, who wants to wear a mask anymore? Really getting ready to go into the grocery store and like, it's just like, when will this be over? And people are burnt out. People aren't taking vacation. People aren't able to compartmentalize who are working from home. It's just like this never ending, the computer's open all the time. and you just, you walk by and you're engaged, we have to recognize what's going on, and then we have to take those steps to self-correct, to make sure that we're giving people those boundaries and allowing them to check out if they need to, or whatever any of these points are. But without opening it up and talking about it, we can't act proactively on it.
Yeah, one thing that you mentioned just real quick is the whole mental health side of things. I mean, just as a personal example, I have a large mental health addiction treatment provider. Their visits are at all-time highs.
Oh, yeah.
And so much has been hyper-fixated with good reason on cases, ICU admissions, hospitalizations, and mortality. But we also need to make sure that we're being cognizant of the mental health side of this, because that's equally as important as the physical health side of this.
EAP programs, and then I'll give the floor back to everybody else. I'm so passionate
Yeah,
about
that's
this.
great.
A lot of people employers now are going, oh, I didn't realize we had an EAP program. It's part of our benefits package. Well, we need to be promoting that to our team members. We need to be telling them there's these employee assistance programs out there that are part of our benefits program. It has free mental health visits, it has financial counseling, has marriage counseling, it has substance abuse counseling, and it's all part of your employee benefit package already. Use it.
Or should we?
Absolutely.
I had one point I wanted to make, and you guys are going to think I'm the last person on earth that would be making this point. It's about schools, okay? It's about the fact that I don't have any children. It doesn't impact me remotely. I forget the kids aren't in school.
Sure.
So I think that we're not going to see really what the workplace looks like again, even a little bit, until that component is taken out of the equation. Obviously, especially a lot of hourly employees don't have the luxury of sending children to daycare or finding alternative arrangements. So they are being permitted to work remotely because of the current hybrid or remote learning situation. And I completely forget that half the time since it doesn't impact me.
Yeah.
But
It's a huge issue. We've seen it, repeatedly as well. And, again, it's really hard when you've got people that actually want to go back to work,
Yes.
but they can't
Right.
because they either don't have childcare or their daycares are operated under a pandemic license.
Right.
And so their ratios have been cut down.
Yep.
Or the schools aren't in operation, or they're going remotely. I mean, it's such a tiered effect, and it's just a ripple effect through, all of society, which is, a huge challenge. And so how do you manage through this? Something like that?
Disproportionately affecting women.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because, statistically, in partnership relationships, women do make less money. And if a partner has to give up their job, unfortunately, often it's the woman.
Right.
Or with single parents, disproportionately, there are more women who have primary custody of children than men. So they're more affected by that. I think the gap in the childcare in this country has always been a problem. And I think that this is going to shine a light on it. And this is one of the benefits that employers need to look at,
Sure.
their opportunity to come in and help with that.
And I agree. I mean, we're 15 people. We had 3 guys here. And so having a workforce of women, we got hit unusually hard with the childcare issue. And what's interesting for me is, like, at first I viewed it as a challenge. Now I view it as an opportunity, because we just said, why not be permanently flexible? We're forced to learn how to do it. We know how to do it now. So let's make it a permanent benefit for people to be flexible. And so I want to go back to something you talked about that is something that, so I really agree with you, Kit, regarding, putting the well-being of the person first. I mean, I think that a lot of small businesses were back on their heels just to survive and stay in business, and they kind of forgot the people part of it. And as things have changed, it's becoming more and more obvious. The question I have for you is that what I think I'm hearing you say is that if you make bigger and bigger investments in people and do the skip down type management, does that make the business less efficient? I mean, is that something where you're going to have to think about delivering your goods and services with less people, because it takes more time to invest in people and embrace technology so you have the culture you really, really want? Because I'm thinking, like, how do you go from pre-COVID, you weren't doing all these extra things, and you had great efficiency, and now all of a sudden, because it's more important than ever, and it's probably a permanent change, not a temporary change, and that makes total sense to me. Does that, I mean, in your opinion, is the question, does that make businesses less efficient?
I don't think so. Bottom line, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think, does it mean we have to do things differently? Yes. Do we have to allocate our resources differently? Yes. You know, most small businesses, particularly that don't have the resources to have, you know, a strategic HR person on their team on a regular basis, they need to look at, okay, well, where are we going to get that expertise that's going to help us figure these things out? And it's, you know, just because, I mean, you could have a problem with your heating and air unit, it doesn't mean that you have to hire a full-time HVAC tech either. You bring somebody in, they help with the problem or whatever. So I think that managers have to, first of all, or owners have to recognize that human resources management is it's not a cost center, it's a value added. And once if you're making that transition and you're doing that, then we have people, there are people who come in and they can show you how to do this in a way that it's maximum benefit and is measurable and does not necessarily just become an exercise in handholding.
One of the things that I think it's very challenging for small businesses that, you know, most small businesses are resource constrained in every way. They're resource constrained with people, financially, with time, you know, with, you know, in some respects, access. And one of the challenges for small businesses, and we heard this ourselves, that we were being compared to Google and Amazon and all these other big companies, because that's what the perception was in the media, and maybe it's all true. But it's I think more than ever for small businesses, if you're a shareholder of small businesses, you really have to be strategic about this, because the competition is the perception, what you can and can't do with Google or Huntington Bank or wherever it may be. And we are resource constrained. We don't have unlimited time. Let's start with that one. You know, you don't have unlimited money, and you don't have unlimited talent either, you know, and so
If you figure any of those three out, or you do, let me know, please.
well, yeah, I'll definitely be selling it for a lot of money. But for me, going back to the original conversation about what can we do proactively to change into 2021, is probably really do a strategic assessment on all those matters, on your time ability, on your people, on your financial resources, on, you know, your core business, your core values. And if you don't, you might be, you know, become subject to creative destruction yourself in many respects. So, yeah, and I guess I don't think, do you guys have anything else you want to cover? What time is it anyways? 10 till? Yeah. Okay, perfect.
From a liability perspective, one thing that I didn't touch on that I planned on talking today was a lot of employers were nervous about sending, no matter how much they want to do, whether if you had a team collaborative environment, if training was something that was really important, where the model just works much better with being in person. I mean, those businesses have tried to do virtual meetings during this. All of us have done more virtual meetings than I think we're virtual meeting out. But you know, I've learned how to use it. It's convenience, but there's just certain meetings, certain things that should happen in person just because they're a lot more authentic, a lot more transparent. But that being said, there's been a lot of worry in that if I send my employees back to work and they get sick, how's that going to come back on me? You know, work comp is statutory, it's no fault. That means, you know, and if you get sick on the job, you have coverage. California took that a step forward and said at the very beginning of all this, if you get COVID and you were working, it's just automatically presumed that you caught it on the job, which is just, imagine what that does to rates.
Sure.
In the macro environment that we as brokers can't control. There is also the element of employer's liability, which is if people feel that you were negligent in bringing those employees back to work and you didn't do what you could to help protect them, you can sue the employer for negligence, and then they have to defend and settle potentially that lawsuit. Here in the state of Ohio, as well as other states, there have been bills passed at the state level to provide immunity protection for businesses here in the state of Ohio is House Bill 606. That was signed into law that essentially creates immunity for employers as it relates to contraction of COVID on the job, meaning they can not sue those employers under employer's liability for negligence or them contracting COVID. That being said, you know, a lot of times when I'm talking about contracts and coverage, I sound like a heartless person. Those that know me know I am not. I believe that there's also a social responsibility to the entire thing where we have to look out for each other and protect those that are at risk. I feel that we know way more about this virus as well as how to treat this virus than we did 6 months ago. So that's part of it too. But in theory, just knowing how to define, to document, to communicate, and to adapt to the times is super important right now. But I just wanted people to know, if they didn't know that that was out there, that here in Ohio, we do have immunity protection to protect employers if you are bringing people back to work. If that's your choice, there is protection in there that, you know, provides some sort of peace of mind for employers right now.
So probably the last topic to cover is the impact on all this on our communities. You know, there's a saying we've heard a lot, besides we'll get to what kids unprepared to talk about, but the impact on our communities. And it's interesting, again, not interesting, but, you know, we've heard over and over, we're all in this together. And certainly, you know, as we turn the corner past the election and get into next year, we're still all in this together. And I think there remains, again, for entrepreneurs and shareholders of your company, viewing this as an opportunity to help your community will help you, an opportunity to help your fellow people help you. I know in my own experience, you know, a couple of things that as we're hiring new people, the talent pool is fantastic to interview. I mean, like, I'm looking at the resumes that we have, they've never been so good, you know, and I think people are reflecting on their own personal life. They want to change what they want to do. And also that businesses are more than ever willing to talk to us, you know, and there's more conversations and more ability. So, you know, I think that it is complicated and it's a lot, but as the owner of your business, you know, obviously focusing not only on your business and becoming a well-being of people issue first, and embracing governance policies around how you run your business, and being thoughtful on your space, and that there's going to be some more flexibility built in for a long time, and how does that legally reflect? I think those are all important things. And on top of that, be thoughtful and opportunistic about the communities that we all live in, because we're all in that together, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So
one thing that I've been thinking about on those lines in relation to social responsibility is, if you look at the real estate market, especially in urban environments right now, there's been a lot of questions, especially surrounding professional services firm, about space and do we need all that space. The other impact of it too is that there's been a lot of companies that have declared Chapter 11 or Chapter 7 bankruptcy during this. Not to get off on a tangent that's not related to what we're doing. I am going somewhere with this, I promise. But, you know, historically, a lot of companies wouldn't have declared bankruptcy because of the black market that leads on you. But now a lot of employers are looking to the fact that this is our opportunity to reset. Yeah. So that's happening. And when that happens, I know a lot of companies, a lot of my clients, a lot of my prospects have been able to restructure leases. Some have not, some don't want to, they just want to reset. But when that happens, we're sitting downtown right now. Columbus has had a great urban renaissance with the Columbus 2020 plan over the past couple of decades. What happens now? If all these employers move out and people don't bring people back to work and all these office space sits vacant, what does downtown Columbus or any other urban major market look like at that time? Right?
Well, it's a great question, and one that, you know, we've been trying to figure out the answer for. And you know, frankly, it's a challenge when you've got some of your largest employers downtown that have thousands of people working at home. So, you know, that impacts the local, you know, entrepreneur, the restaurant guy, the bar operator, the retailer. And it's sad to see, because you're exactly right, Vince. You know, for the past 10, 15 years, we've had a phenomenal, you know, resurgence in our downtown. That said, you know, in the last month and a half, I've been to downtown Cleveland, I've been to downtown Denver, and then certainly I work in downtown Columbus. And Cleveland is in a very similar situation to Columbus. It's very vacant. You know, lots of restaurants have closed their doors temporarily and permanently. You know, Columbus the same way. When I was in Denver about 3 or 4 weeks ago, it was very, very different. It was business as usual. It was busy, and things were very, very vibrant. Now, after reflecting on it, I think that the biggest difference is that in some of these older, more mature downtown markets, they've got a much larger population that live in those downtown areas. So downtown Denver has, you know, umpteen, you know, sky rises that are all residential towers, right? You know, downtown Columbus doesn't have one, you know, tower that's just residential. We've got a few mid-rises, but, you know, we're measuring our residents, you know, by the thousand, where, you know, these large downtowns that are still successful are measuring them by the tens of thousands. And I think that was the major difference that I saw in Denver. And so because you've got a lot of people living down there, the employers are more apt and willing to keep their workforce at, you know, within the four walls instead of just pushing them out.
And in the eyes of creative destruction, I believe you'll see a lot of these high-rise office buildings get repurposed to housing. Because that's been, you know, you look at the biggest problem you have in most large cities is the cost of housing in the urban core. And if, you know, you have Salesforce.com sending people home in San Francisco with a brand new building that's beautiful, I bet that gets repurposed into housing at some point in time. So, okay, it's an hour. Apparently we have no questions.
Not yet.
Okay,
I have an additional point.
let's hear it.
Okay.
Prepared or unprepared?
Well, this is something I've been saying for the last several months.
Very prepared.
So very prepared. Very prepared. And I just really, I wanted, I think that one of the things that we've learned from this is that in some cases, remote work can be successful in certain situations. And I think as we move forward, there is still going to be some constraints on hiring people. I think that we're going to have we're still going to have some workforce pools that are pretty restricted, and the unemployment rate is going to be pretty low for those. I think this should help people work their head around the idea that we can hire people who are differently abled and have them be successful in our workplace and very, very productive, where people may not have been able before to really wrap their head around how can we integrate somebody like that into our office. Maybe we can expand our pool of applicants and start considering people who are not traditional, who we would traditionally consider. And I think that that's going to be an important thing to go forward. And I'm trying to encourage everybody to expand that net that they're looking at, include some of these forces that we weren't looking at before.
Yeah, I you know, talking to lots of folks, including Chris at Highland, I mean, he's excited. You might be in jeopardy of losing your job. He's excited that he can hire from anywhere in the world now. You know, and it changes. The whole thing's changed, and I think that even us here, we're like, huh, there's some things we can probably outsource here that we've always thought we had to insource. And it's so outsourcing it to a person that ends up being a human being, there's not an employee. And, you know, I totally agree that again, as small businesses, we should really embrace the idea that to think differently about the labor pools and who and what and where and all that. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sorry, it's a little personal.
No.
Something personally important to me, and I wanted to take this platform.
Yeah, that's why you're here. It's great. Any other closing comments? Prepared or unprepared?
I was just going to say about downtown Columbus, I think, tell me if you agree or disagree, JR. I think that no one's going to build an office anytime soon, and eventually we're going to backfill a lot of these offices.
Yeah, I agree.
I think in 2 years.
Yeah,
we're going to be in good shape.
We've seen more subleases come onto the market in the last 4 weeks than I've seen in the last 4 years.
That's interesting.
Literally.
Wow.
That's good to know.
Yeah. But I've also
because
seen
that speaks to there are people who want to move downtown. So, you know, that the subleases are out there. People are wanting to sign them. There are people who want to move downtown. It's just we're in this transition period.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I think we've seen some fallout, you know, very early on. You know, those that got hit really hard and hurt really bad, you know, it happened pretty quickly.
Right.
And so we've seen that fall out through these subleases. We're still going to see, you know, some of that, you know, happen, I think, in the next 6-9 months. You know, the subleases are a big indicator of exactly what Alicia's, you know, speaking to.
Good.
So there will be some opportunities for some people to upgrade into some really great spaces. I mean, we've got some clients who've already put into a couple of
You just did a deal there.
couple of great spaces. They probably saved 30%, you know, compared to what they would have paid just 12 months ago.
Well, they saved 30% and upgraded their space too. You know,
Dramatically.
So that's a very real, and they're very timely in that decision.
There's still real estate transactions being done because people's leases are still expiring. And so they have to do something, whether it's renew, downsize, expand. So there's still, you know, transactions going on. And so for those that are really looking for an opportunity, it could be a great opportunity to upgrade their space.
Right. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thank you for attending the webinar. Hopefully you learned something new and it gave you some food for thought for 2021 and change that you get to induce yourself versus be induced upon you. Thank you.